every now and again, still on set, sometimes, you know, I have it almost on every job where I'll, usually near the end, you know, where I'll just sit back for a second and just appreciate that everybody is marching in the same direction if it's working well. And everybody, it's this ecosystem. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. Everybody has completely different skill sets, but they're all sort of marching in the same direction for the same common goal. And it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Gugu Mbatha-Raw is an actor. She sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character? Is there a typical first step that you always take? When you're alone with the script, you have the part, and what's your first step toward kind of wrapping your arms around this new person that you have to play?
Well, it begins with the script. Exactly that. I read the script, I read it again, I read it again. For me, the writing gives me so many clues. I think because I went to drama school, you know, breaking down a script is still very much part of my process. And I try and be as prepared as I can, but also try and stay open. I think, you know, I like to build the character slowly with the director. For me, also things like the first costume fitting or, you know, those more physical things are really informative. Music is really informative. Things that I might use for a certain scene or a certain emotion. But the script is the first thing.
When you pick music to listen to, are you already thinking about the character and what they would be listening to? Or is it stuff that is just igniting something in you?
You know, I worked with a theatre director early on called Ian Rickson, who used to be the artistic director of the Royal Court in London. And he gave me one of my first lead roles in a TV film called Fallout. And early on, he gave me a playlist. And I'd never had this before, but and I tend to love to do it now. It was a sort of playlist, like a mixtape for the character. And that really got me thinking about that. And it wasn't just the character, it was maybe his idea. These are not songs that are going to end up in the show. They're not going to be on the soundtrack, but it's more like things that you have the mood of the scene or the mood of a moment or an emotional vibe, for want of a better word. And I just loved it, and I would play it in my trailer getting ready every morning, and you know, certain songs I'd find really helpful. And then since then I've sort of tried to do that for myself on most things. And you know, in some projects, you know, when I did Black Mirror, San Junipero, that was set in the 80s. Charlie Brooker, the creator of that, had written into the script certain songs. And I mean, there was the iconic Belinda Carlisle song, Heaven is a Place on Earth, and a load of other 80s music that has a particular tone. So occasionally there's stuff like that, or a period piece. Like when I did Motherless Brooklyn, you know, 1957, we're talking about the jazz of that time in New York. But otherwise, sometimes it will just be a piece of music that opens me up emotionally. If there's a song or a classical piece of music that I can listen to and just kind of helps peel off the layers that we have to vulnerability. And there's certain vibrations musically that really do touch you and allow you to be more open in a scene.
And isn't it about like because how we relate to music is on an unconscious level, and that's where you're trying to enter into in this work, right? So it's something like the entry points of that's not tangible or touchable. But you also I heard you talk about smell.
Yes, that's another one.
Talk about that.
That's another one that I discovered early on in my career. I was doing 2 TV jobs, 2 different, and they were sort of supporting roles at the same time. And you know, I'd do 2 days on one set as one character and maybe 2 days on another set. And this went on for a few weeks. And for me, I ended up sort of changing scents or changing perfumes as a way to get me away from myself, first of all, get me away from my own energy, but also sort of dive me straight into that place, that person. And I think scent is so powerful in terms of memory, in terms of, it just goes straight into your brain and it's very evocative. You can smell the scent of somebody you used to know walking along the street and suddenly you're there.
Yes.
And, all sorts, and not just perfumes, all sorts of scents from, coffee to freshly cut grass to cigar smoke, they're all very, very evocative. And so for me, that became a way, and I do it for nearly every character. And it depends, because not every character I could decide would even wear perfume. It's not necessarily about perfume in a sort of smelling amazing way. I mean, I played Nell Gwyn at the Globe Theatre, and she was the first actress, at the time of King Charles in England in the sort of restoration. And she was an orange seller in the theatre initially, and a comedienne, and I sort of got into reading about aromatherapy, and citrus and orange is very uplifting, and so I used a sort of orange blossom scent for her because she was funny, she was very vivacious, and there was something about the essential oil of that tapped into that brightness.
Gets you right there. It gets you
gets you there. I mean, when I was playing Ophelia, I used a lot of frankincense. I think because there's something very soulful about that, and there was a depth to her and her emotional journey. So it's not always, here's Chanel number 5 or something. It can be something that I feel like is right for the person, and also just gets my mind and my senses into the character. So it's not just, it's like another layer of clothing, that you kind of, but it's a much more visceral one.
And do you do it for every character?
Pretty much. Sometimes I can't find something, or I choose something and then it doesn't seem right. I just did a job where I had to wear a lot of prosthetics, and there was already so many things going on, in terms of chemicals and scents, and for me, it just didn't feel I needed it for that character. There was a lot of other things that helped me physically get into the role, and scent didn't factor into that character in the same way. But for most things, and now, coming back to the second season of Surface, the show that I do for Apple, it's the first lead character that I've done a second season of. And, I did Loki, but that was a supporting role. And so for me now, and especially with a character like Sophie, who has memory loss, for me, even putting on the scent that I chose 4 years ago for her, putting it on now, or putting it on in the second season, it's powerful. It gets you straight back into who that person is, especially when you're playing a character over a long period of time. And you may have 4 or 5 other jobs between that first season and that second season. So much life goes on that to be able to have that thing that anchors you and your memories, not just as the character, but just as the actor as well. It just brings you back in and goes, okay, we're here now. We're going to settle into this world again.
That's amazing. I don't get out much, and I don't, and I certainly didn't get out much 10 or 12 years ago. Certainly not to plays in this city, and I regret that. But it's just it was a poverty thing,
It's so expensive.
It's so expensive.
I can't believe how expensive it is now to go and see a play on Broadway. It's kind of insane.
And I now get invited to plays because of this podcast. Not nearly enough, and I take great offense to that. I take it personally. I should be invited to everything. But I did see you as Ophelia in Hamlet. Somebody took me to that. And I remember you making an impression on me because I looked it up and I saw your name. Because I didn't know who you were at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you were in America at all yet.
That was my first time coming to America with that play.
Yeah.
So we'd done it in the West End. Then we went for a week to Denmark to do it in the Elsinore Castle, the original castle that inspired Shakespeare to write the play.
Wow.
And then we came to Broadway for 12 weeks. And that was my first trip to America, my first trip to New York, my Broadway debut, all rolled up in one.
That's amazing.
So it was an incredible experience. And being in New York with a Shakespeare play, and I think just the audiences, I mean, you know, we're very spoilt for Shakespeare in the UK, and obviously there's a lot of Shakespeare here, but I think there was an enthusiasm and an energy to the audiences on Broadway, maybe because they paid so much for tickets. They're determined to enjoy it.
Yes.
And less complacent than the British audiences, but it was really such an amazing energy. It changed my life, really, that experience.
Is your Shakespeare foundation still serving you in other work? Do you know what I mean? Is it, can you explain how?
I think it's in the most unusual ways, because I think it's about the size of the language with Shakespeare and the poetry of the language. And I think, weirdly, I feel served by Shakespeare when I'm doing something quite fantastical, out of this world, maybe in the sci-fi canon of work, because I think there is a sort of heightened element to the language and the poetry that I've definitely felt like I've used even when I was doing Loki, you know, and other things that are, you know, when you're talking about the universe and the you know, big epic emotions, sometimes there is a naturalism to screen work and more modern productions. But I think when I've done things, as I say, that are set outside of this world, or a character that is not from this world, I find myself tapping into that Shakespearean breadth of size of language. So yeah, it definitely serves me. I think there's also a discipline that you get from having to speak Shakespeare in terms of using your instrument, for want of a better word, a drama school term, but your instrument, your voice, your body, being able to have that size of language, and the technique required to sustain that, especially when you're, again, playing with big emotions on screen or extremes. I think having the technique that you need with Shakespeare to support you on extremely emotional material, so that you're not ripping your throat out, crying and screaming and losing your voice. And, you know, there is a certain kind of care that you learn to, you know, and it's muscular. I think there's a muscular energy to that kind of language that once you have it, there is a muscle memory where you have to go big with something. It doesn't mean that it's not real or true. I think, you know, a lot of, certainly growing up and first doing screen work, I sort of had the misconception that being on screen, you had to just be small, and being real was being small. And it's like, you know, and then you've only got to look at the world. You know, there is extreme, you know, walking down the street in New York or looking on the news, like there is, the real world is extremely big in terms of emotions, and actually being small isn't actually being naturalistic, you know, but I think you've got to have the equipment to support that. So I think Shakespeare definitely gives you that, because the language is, you know, as I say, muscular.
Yes. And speaking of that, like discovering that maybe small is not exactly always best, were you making other discoveries about how you work best?
Well, certainly, you know, I trained in theatre. There was maybe one course in screen acting at RADA when I was there, but it wasn't very in depth, and it was, you know, more just recording a scene and watching it back, you know. So everything that I've learned about being on set, I've learned on the job. And I think initially there's just so much that goes on set. There's so many distractions, there's so many technicalities, that protecting your space as an actor and then learning how to sort of claim the space and not be crushed by the technicalities going around you.
Yes.
And I think, and that's where having a playlist helps sometimes. If you're, they're taking a long time to set up something or you're about to go and a light needs to be changed, I just put my earbuds in. I just get back into my zone. And sometimes, you don't always have, some sets are more conducive than others to performance,
Yes.
and so for me, I think it's just learning what I need, being incredibly prepared, but also not being afraid to be actory. And I mean that by, if I just need to like exhale or make a big actory noise on set or shake my body or ask for a couple of minutes from the first AD of complete silence before we go into a scene, without feeling like you're being demanding or asking too much, actually to reclaim the space so that you can do your work.
Yes.
And I think maybe starting out, it was just an intimidating environment to do that, and you sort of forget all this technicality, but the camera is pointing at you at the end of the day. That's what everybody is collaborating towards, and without being immodest about it, I think it takes a certain confidence to claim the space and change the energy of the space to make it what you need.
Do you wish you spoke up sooner, or was it really just not possible? If you're not high on the call sheet, something like that is just maybe have ramifications for you if you do.
It's not so much speaking up as like you say, I still needed to learn what everybody did. The first few jobs I had, I wasn't the lead and I didn't know I just had to focus on myself, but I didn't know what a focus puller did or a cinematographer did or a grip or it was just a load of people to me initially, and I just kept my connection with the director and the actors, and then I was like, oh, the crew just felt like this this group of technicians that I just didn't understand their roles. And I think job by job, obviously, and being on set, you learn and and I'm in awe of what the crew does, and I'm in awe of the collaborative nature of everything that, every now and again still on set, sometimes, I have it almost on every job where I'll, usually near the end, where I'll just sit back for a second and just appreciate that everybody is marching in the same direction if it's working well. And it's this ecosystem. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. Everybody has completely different skill sets, but they're all sort of marching in the same direction for the same common goal. And it's a beautiful thing to witness, if you're confident in your bit, but I think that there is a comfort in that hierarchy and those roles. I've definitely learnt that from being on set, and I think, then when you get lead roles, you do get given more space, you get given more influence. And now on Surface, I'm an EP as well. And that's another layer of responsibility, but also just having a perspective and having also a respect and a space to make sure that the dynamics are working best for everybody.
And what works best for you from a director? Have you pinpointed that yet? If you could build a director that works best for you, what are the qualities they would have?
I think some of the best experiences I've had with directors are where we've had a great sort of prep period. I remember working with Gina Prince-Bythewood on Beyond the Lights, and it took a long time to get the funding for that film. And, but we built the character. I was doing dance lessons and singing lessons, and we were sort of creating her world, and, we were doing acting improvisation exercises out in the real world, and, going to the Grammys to research the music industry. And it was a process. That was a wonderful process. and you don't always get that time.
Yeah.
But that was wonderful. And I think I really appreciate directors that have the vocabulary. You know, not all directors have an actor's vocabulary.
Yeah.
People come from different backgrounds in terms of their way into the industry. I appreciate a director that nudges me in a direction, but doesn't necessarily tell me what they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can sometimes be prohibitive, you know, when a director, I mean, at drama school, they used to call it end gaming, but, you know, kind of are asking for the end result, but that's actually not an actionable thing to play as an actor, you know. I appreciate a director that nudges me, hey, on this one, try this, do this, you know, but still gives me freedom to keep working the material, you know, not trying to get it right. We're playing, you know. I appreciate directors that keep things playful, because I think that's where you allow the best work to come through, and you stay loose and you're not, you know, tightening up to try and get to some result. You know, that to me is never, you know, I sort of like to be surprised and and somebody that I can trust and is, as I say, able to kind of quietly nudge you towards where you need to go. That's often where I respond best.
The way the Hello Sunshine people talk about you on the morning show is like them kind of flipping out about you and trying to find something for you. Or maybe that's not quite. Maybe they did have surface and we're like, oh, she's the one. But did you know this was going on at this time? You're on this show. You're playing a pivotal role, but it's not one of the exactly the starring roles. But there was people like saying, "Oh, we gotta find something."
You know, I didn't know, and I had such an amazing experience on the morning show, season 1. And I remember when Mimi Leader, the producing director of the show, pitched me the arc of Hannah. You know, I'd only read a few pages. You couldn't see all the scripts, or all the scripts weren't written at the time, and Kerry Erin, the showrunner, and Mimi just told me on the phone what the arc of the story was, and it gave me chills. And I was, you know, and I knew I'd have to wait a good few episodes to get to the meat of the character, but I was excited about that. And of course I was excited about working with Reese Witherspoon, Jennifer Aniston, Steve Carell on essentially the first flagship show for Apple, which was brand new at that time as a streaming service. So it was an amazing opportunity. And I think, but you had to have faith. You know, I didn't see the scripts. It was a pitch. It was I was told the story arc. But I mean, Kerry Erin wrote amazing material for my character, really deep. And you know, getting to film that main flashback episode with Steve Carell, who's such a phenomenal actor. And there's an actor that really is playing every take. He's playing and searching, and, you know, it's never going to be the same. And that really made me a better actor working alongside him. So I know I had a really meaty storyline, but you never know how it's going to be received. And I think it was 2020 when I first got the script for the first version of the first pilot for Surface. And it came through my agent, and I remember seeing on the top of it, "Hello Sunshine" on the email, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, that's going to the top of the pile. I need to read that now," you know. But it wasn't picked up. It wasn't with Apple at the time. But I knew the producers at Hello Sunshine, and I thought, if this is coming from them, they know my work. I know their ethos. It's female-driven storytelling. Reese Witherspoon, you know, in the wake of Me Too at the time, that first season of the morning show was a real talking point, you know, the abuse of power and all the themes around that conversation of abuse of power in the workplace. So I knew that it was going to be something worth looking at. And then when I read the script, I was just so drawn into this noir mystery world of this woman who's lost her memory, you know, front and center. of this psychological thriller. So that's really how it began. And knowing the ethos of Hello Sunshine, when they invited me to be, part of the EP team, I was so passionate about the material. I remember I was filming Loki at the time, first season in Atlanta, and I was playing, a cool character, but there weren't as many nuances to her in that world as I saw potentially in Sophie. So for me, it was a really refreshing moment to sort of dive from a supporting role in a Marvel franchise to a lead role in a nuanced piece of material that I could really get my teeth into, and the opportunity to learn about producing.
Yes. I remember when The Favorite came out.
A New York Times critic, who I will not name, but I don't think he works there anymore, tweeted under the guise of thinking he was taking a stab at the patriarchy, saying, "Oh, look at these despicable women characters that these women have to play." As if that was bad. And I remember thinking for a second in my still slightly maybe unconscious way, yeah, that's true. Why do we? And then it took me years after that to realize, wait, this is amazing. Men get to play these kind of characters. And your character in this series has a lot of question marks about the things in her past.
And that's, you've got to fight for that nuance. And I think that's what I'm always interested in. And I think some of the first jobs I had in LA, you were sort of burdened with being likable as, as a female lead, having to be likability and all of that kind of stuff, which is so condescending, really, and limiting. And I think that what I loved about Sophie and what I love about Surface, certainly in season 1, she's looking to rebuild her life, and she's looking to her husband, who can she trust? She's looking to her lover, her friend, and she's thinking, is he the bad guy or is he the bad guy? And then, as you get through the journey of the first season, you realize, oh, right, no, I'm the bad guy. And to be able to play a flawed, complex, messy woman who is morally ambiguous. I mean, she makes, she discovers that she is not as innocent or as perfect as she's been led to believe. I mean, that to me is the juicy stuff. That's and like you say, men get to play those layered roles all the time. So for me, that was a refreshing moment to see that in a psychological thriller, and having seen, amnesia dramas with men at the center, with all of that complexity. Again, like The Morning Show, I feel like Sophie and the characters in the world of Surface definitely exist in the grey area, where you think you can't put anybody in a box. You can't judge them morally as good or bad. I think, you think somebody you can't trust them, and then you find out something else, another layer, another perspective on who they are, and it sort of flips your expectations. So for me, those are the kind of roles and those are the kind of stories, certainly long form, if you're going to be doing something for, at this point, 16 hours of streaming television. You want to be able to feel like you've got an arc, you've got somewhere to go, and it's deep, and it's not necessarily just you're not just playing one note all the time.
But did this actually mess with kind of your this particular role mess with your kind of idea of knowing a backstory of a character? Because this character doesn't even know her own backstory. So did you have to actually kind of remove yourself from kind of filling in that in the traditional way or something like that? Did you think about something like that?
It was quite liberating in a way, because, I've played roles, historical roles where there's plenty of research and you can almost go into a deep dive history lesson of reading material and source material, or real characters that really existed, and there's just lots to draw on. But I think what was different about playing Sophie, because she has no memory, you can't build a typical backstory in that way. So it forces you to be really present in the scenes. And I think for me, that's why going into the more sensual smell, taste, touch, you know, finding the perfume, finding the music, finding the things that trigger her memories, be it a sip of whiskey at a bar that she doesn't recognize, but suddenly the taste of that whiskey reminds her of something familiar, you know, those kind of things. I think, you know, I had to kind of make her more into an open book of childlike curiosity, and it was the sensory overwhelming things that came into her world that really helped her build her sense of self. So it's a different way in. It's a different way in. And now we're at this point in this season where she has some memories, but not all. And so there's a little bit more to play with. But I think because she has some memories, I think it puts her in a much more stable place and a much more empowered place. She has so much more autonomy, but she still doesn't know everything. She's still kind of going into scenarios where people have more information than she does. So it gives her a sort of undercover poker face, you know, that she needs to have to be able to glean these clues about her life. So, and the audience is in on that, which is nice. But obviously the other characters in the scenes don't know how little she knows, if you know what I mean. But it's kind of a nice way for her to hold her power while she uses those situations to find out more.
Because you're the EP on this too, and suddenly there's more responsibility maybe that you're taking on. An actor already has so much responsibility, and and especially when you're the number one on the call sheet. But did you relish this responsibility? Did you take on the idea of being number one on the call sheet as a great opportunity to set a tone on set? And what, to explain that a little bit about going into this initially.
I think you don't always realize it at first, but you're not just the lead of the show. You're the leading actor, and that's another role.
Right.
You're the leader, you're the team leader, you set the tone, and consciously or not, people are looking to you to set the tone.
Right.
And what's okay, what's not okay, what's the energy level, what's the culture of the set. You know, as somebody told me very early in my career, the fish rots from the head, which is, you know, but that idea of, you know, if you are at the top, you know, if there's a problem somewhere down the line, it's going to have been something to do with you, or the buck stops with you, I guess. So for me, you know, I don't take that lightly. And you know, you do have to kind of bring an energy to the set, but also a lot of that has, you know, you've been part of the pre-production process. And for me, it's been fascinating being on the other side of the casting process, you know, hiring the directors, you know, seeing the directors pitch to us as opposed to me auditioning for them. You know, that totally flips, you know, how you see the DNA of a show, you know, in not just from your character's arc, but the pace of the whole show, the tone of it, how those different choices in cinematography and costume design and the composer, they all contribute to making the show as a whole. It is more responsibility, it is more work, and certainly, you know, we had some challenges, and as the whole industry did, you know, when we were filming season 2 with the strikes of, you know, actors and writers, and being able to bring the show back, pick up the momentum after a hiatus, and, you know, and keep the team motivated and know that we're finishing this show. And even though it took longer than, you know, we had initially hoped, you know, to be able to kind of be an EP in a scenario like that, it's challenging because you've got to show leadership. And so, you know, we're all incredibly grateful that we got to finish the show, but that was definitely another layer this time around, and, you know, alongside my producers at Hello Sunshine, you know, we had to step up and, you know, when we didn't necessarily have a showrunner on the set, or, you know, being able to kind of take on that responsibility and, as I say, show leadership at a time when things in the industry were very wobbly.
When I talk to actors who are on TV shows that are particularly the stars of TV shows that have different directors coming in on one particular story that's over the course of many episodes. There's two different varying approaches to the idea of different directors. Either they say it's great. Each different director adds a different flavor, and it's interesting to be working with them. Some other people say, though, no, this is a really bad part of this whole system because you can't help but like one director over the other. Then that person comes in, and although they're very capable, you still miss that other director. Do you relate to either one of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky balance, and you have to kind of, I think that's where the role of a showrunner comes in, certainly in an ongoing series, because it's the showrunner's job to have the encyclopedic knowledge of the show and almost the vision of the show. And that's maybe more of an American way of doing things. And it's certainly been an interesting challenge bringing a show from Canada or, and an American way of doing things to the UK, where we don't have that showrunner culture in the same way. But I think it's been a really interesting learning curve because, the idea of a director, being, it's the director's vision, and it's the director's story, whereas when you've got an ongoing show, the director is sort of more of a director for hire for an episode, or 2 episodes or 3 episodes, and they can make their mark, but it still has to be within the overall vision of the show. So that's been an interesting shift, certainly from working, in a more US style to working in a more British culture. But I will say, I love working with different directors, I think, and there is an ownership then over your character where there's nobody that knows the character better than you do at this point. So you're looking to the director for different things when you've played a character this long. I think you're not saying, oh, was that okay? Like, can you help me build this person? It's more like, okay, where are we now? Like, how can we, elevate this world? How, and you're looking to the director to kind of set the pace and give it a feeling rather than, are you helping me build my performance? You've just got a different ownership of the role. And that's kind of interesting. But I've loved working with different directors on this show, certainly. And we had one director, Ed Lilly, season 2, who did three episodes, so a few more. Alric Riley, who's an amazing director, did the finale. Lindsay Miller and John East, all very different directors. But for me, when you're filming for 5 months, it's nice to come in, month, 3.5 with somebody with fresh energy. It's quite a marathon, and we had a lot of night shoots, and so sometimes it's great to have a director that's freshly prepped, a new cinematographer comes in and picks you up, when you're sort of sprinting to the finish line. So there's pros and cons, but overall, I think it's lovely to have fresh energy and fresh perspectives.
Now that you've dipped into the other side of the table and like you're saying, casting sessions, picking directors, all these producer duties, and because you're a great actor who happens to be a woman, and we still don't have, even now, adequate material coming to women on a level that it is coming to men. We still don't. Does it make you want to just start fully developing your own material and for you to act in?
I am developing my own material. I've got a couple of projects in development. It's been an amazing experience. And like you say, you can't then unsee, you can't unknow what you know. Then what are you going to do about it? And I have huge respect for producers and directors. And, that's a whole job in itself. Those roles are huge and a huge responsibility. But I think, it's a natural progression, I think, to be able to develop things, and that takes time as well. You know, I think from either, you know, be it a book or an article, you know, I've got a couple of things that I'm working on from different angles, but I don't know the schedule. I don't know how long that's going to take.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have those irons in the fire while you're acting in other projects that you can kind of nurture and push along as you're kind of growing these skills. So yeah, that's definitely what I'm up to.
Gugu Mbatha-Raw, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.